The average American household will spend over $500 on air conditioning this summer. African mud houses in the Sahel, where temperatures regularly hit 115 degrees Fahrenheit, stay 20 degrees cooler than the outside air. No electricity, no bill, no unit that fails when the power goes out. You know that feeling when you walk into a building on a hot day and the cool hits you before you even get through the door? That heavy, stone-cold air that stops you in your tracks? That's what it feels like to walk into a traditional mud-brick home in West Africa, in 115-degree heat, with no air conditioning running anywhere inside. African builders figured out how to create that feeling 5,000 years ago. Air conditioning is 122 years old. These methods are 5,000 years old. One costs you $500 every summer and fails in a power outage. The other costs almost nothing, runs on physics, and has never once stopped working. Your grandmother's grandmother knew this. Today you're going to. Before the first method, one thing you need to understand, because once you do, everything that follows makes complete sense. Heat gets into your home three ways. Radiation, direct sunlight hitting your walls and windows and converting to heat inside. Conduction, heat traveling through your walls from outside to inside. And convection, hot air moving in through openings and replacing cool air. Modern homes fight all three of these with one tool, the air conditioner. It runs constantly, costs constantly, and the moment it stops, all three problems come rushing back at once. African builders didn't fight heat after it entered. They prevented it from entering at all. Every method you're about to learn attacks radiation, conduction, or convection, often all three simultaneously, before the heat ever reaches the people living inside. And they developed these solutions in conditions that made an Arizona summer look mild. The Hausa Fulani of northern Nigeria were solving this problem in the Sahel, where the dry season stretches for months and temperatures hit 115 degrees with no cold season coming to help. The builders of ancient Egypt were engineering cooling into homes 4,000 years before air conditioning was invented. The same solutions, independently developed across 54 countries, tested across 5,000 years, kept appearing because they worked. A method that works at 115 degrees with no electricity works in your house on the hottest day of the year. The conditions these techniques were born in are exactly why they are more proven than anything the modern building industry has produced. And the first one starts with the walls. The Great Mosque of Djenné in Mali is the largest mud brick structure on Earth. It has been continuously inhabited and actively used for over 700 years. It sits in the middle of the Sahel, and it has never contained a single air conditioning unit. Inside, it is cool. Here is why. The walls of traditional West African mud brick construction are 18 to 24 inches thick, not for decoration, not for structural strength alone, for a physics property called thermal mass. Dense materials, mud brick, clay, stone, absorb heat slowly, so slowly that heat hitting the outside wall at noon doesn't reach the interior until midnight. By midnight, the outside is already cooled. The night air is pulling heat back out through the same walls, and the interior never reaches what the exterior hit during the day. Modern drywall has near zero thermal mass. Heat penetrates in under an hour. Your air conditioner isn't solving a climate problem. It's compensating for a building failure. African builders in the Sahel knew this without knowing the term for it. They used termite mound clay in many regions, the most mineral-dense, tightly packed clay available in sub-Saharan Africa, because they observed over generations that it held temperature better than anything else. Modern architectural studies of traditional Sahelian buildings have confirmed what those builders already knew. Interior temperatures 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than exterior during peak heat hours. NASA's passive cooling research studied traditional African mud brick construction specifically because it outperformed synthetic alternatives in extreme heat environments. The knowledge that was labeled primitive is now being studied by space agencies. I stepped into a traditional mud brick home once, visiting family, and I stood there for a full minute before I understood what I was feeling. Outside, it was the kind of heat that makes you squint. Inside, it was cool enough to forget about the outside completely. No hum of a unit, no vents blowing, just walls. Thick, dense, clay walls, doing the work silently. 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler, no electricity, built from the ground itself. But thermal mass is the container. What African builders put inside that container, how they moved air through it, is where this gets even more remarkable. And it starts with a principle so simple you've already felt it. You've felt it every time you've stood near a fireplace and noticed the air moving toward you, not away. Warm air is less dense than cool air. It rises. Every physicist knows this. Every African builder 4,000 years ago already knew this. They just built around it instead of writing it down. Traditional North and West African homes, Moroccan riads, Hausa compounds in northern Nigeria, ancient Egyptian houses, are built around a central open courtyard. Most people who see these homes think the courtyard is decorative, a pleasant outdoor space, a garden. It is not decorative. It is an engine. Here is what it does. The courtyard sits open to the sky. During the day, the ground heats up. Hot air rises from that heated ground, up through the courtyard opening, and out. As it rises and exits, it creates a pressure difference. That pressure difference pulls cooler air from the shaded interior rooms, through archways, under covered walkways, along the floor where people are living, to replace what left through the top. No fan, no electricity, continuous airflow driven entirely by temperature difference. The building generates its own breeze. Building scientists today call this the stack effect. Research documented in CIBC building design guides, the same source the top Japanese cooling videos cite, confirms that cross-ventilation driven by the stack effect is effective across up to 5 times the ceiling height of a building. Traditional African courtyard design achieves this automatically through its geometry. The builders didn't use the term, they used the result. Ancient Egyptian homes used this principle 4,000 years before air conditioning was invented. The Hausa compound in northern Nigeria uses it in mudbrick form across one of the hottest regions on Earth. In Morocco, the Riyadh design, courtyard home with a fountain at the center, adds water to the equation, which we'll come back to in a moment. I once visited a traditional compound in West Africa, and I did what most visitors do. I stood in the courtyard and looked up, thinking I was just in a nice open space. Then someone pointed out that I was standing inside a chimney. The hot air was leaving through the top. The cool air was coming in at my feet. There was a draft, on a completely still day, with nothing running anywhere. I hadn't noticed it until it was explained to me. Then I couldn't unfeel it. Now, the courtyard is remarkable. But there's a version of this principle that African builders took even further. A structure that doesn't wait for the courtyard to pull air up. It goes out and catches wind at height and brings it directly into the living space. 0 moving parts, 0 electricity, continuous operation. Ancient Egypt called it the malkaf, and it is one of the most elegant pieces of passive engineering ever built. In the year 2000, a Nigerian teacher named Mohammed Bah Abba won the Rolex Award for Enterprise, one of the most prestigious innovation prizes in the world. What he won it for was a clay pot inside a larger clay pot, with wet sand between them and a wet cloth on top. That's it, 2 pots. Sand, water. The award citation noted that his design kept vegetables fresh for weeks in 110-degree heat without electricity. What the citation also noted, almost as an aside, was that the design he reintroduced was already thousands of years old. He didn't invent it, he recovered it. UNICEF now uses it across sub-Saharan Africa for medicine storage in communities without electricity. 2 pots and wet sand, keeping medicine viable in conditions where a modern refrigerator would need a generator to run. The science is the same principle that cools your skin when you sweat. When water evaporates, It draws heat energy from whatever it's evaporating from. The surface gives up heat to power the evaporation, and cools as it does. The wet sand between the two pots evaporates continuously, drawing heat from the inner pot, dropping the interior temperature 15 to 20 degrees below the surrounding air. In 110-degree heat, the inner pot reaches between 90 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Enough to keep vegetables fresh for weeks. Enough to keep medicines viable for days. With 2 clay pots and water that costs nothing. African builders applied this same principle at the scale of entire buildings. Wet clay walls. The evaporation from the wall surface cools the wall before heat conducts through it. Water features in the center of courtyards, evaporating continuously, cooling the air that the stack effect then pulls through the rooms. Wet mats hung in doorways. Wet cloth over window openings. Every water element in traditional African domestic architecture is doing the same thermodynamic work as the Zeer pot. Evaporative cooling at building scale, driven by the same physics that won a man a Rolex award in 2000 for a technology that was already ancient when he found it. I built a Zeer pot once to verify this myself. 2 terracotta pots from a garden center, coarse sand, water. Total cost, $11. I put a thermometer inside. 4 hours later, the interior was reading 18 degrees cooler than the room it was sitting in. $11. No electricity. I left it running for 3 weeks. The temperature differential held every day. The very same evaporative principle was independently developed in Japan, the practice of sprinkling water on hot pavement to cool the surrounding air, which the top Japanese cooling videos document extensively. African communities were using that same physics inside their buildings centuries before Japan named the practice. Same physics, earlier application. But here's what the Zeer pot doesn't solve, and what the next method does. The Zeer pot cools a small space. The courtyard cools a building. What about the heat that tries to reach the building in the first place? The U.S. Department of Energy has published research on exterior shading. They're finding, hang something on the outside of a west-facing window and you block up to 77% of solar heat gain. Do it on the inside. Close your blinds after the sun hits the glass, and you block about 45%. By the time you pull those blinds, the heat is already in the room. African builders solved this at the scale of the entire wall, not just the window. Traditional thatched roofing across sub-Saharan Africa extends 3 to 4 feet past the exterior wall. The entire wall sits in shade during the hottest parts of the day. If the wall never receives direct solar radiation, it never needs to dissipate that heat load. The overhang prevents the problem before it starts. The same physics as the Sudare screens in Japanese cooling videos, applied across the whole structure instead of one window. Light-colored clay and lime wash on exterior walls reflect 80 to 90% of solar radiation. African builders used pale clay and lime not for aesthetics. For the same reason modern building scientists recommend light-colored roofing, reflectivity. The heat that bounces off the wall is heat that never enters the building. Then there are the trees. The Amish cooling tradition documents strategic tree planting on the south and west sides of homes, blocking the strongest solar rays. Traditional African homesteads have been doing this for longer than the Amish have existed as a community. A mature tree canopy does 2 things. It shades the wall and it cools the surrounding air through a process called evapotranspiration, releasing moisture into the air as it photosynthesizes. Studies confirm that air under a tree canopy runs up to 10 degrees cooler than air in direct sun. An African compound with a mature tree on the west side has a natural heat shield that runs on photosynthesis and costs nothing to maintain. And cooking. Traditional African homes across every region keep the cooking fire outside the living space, universally, not regionally. The Amish arrived at the same solution and called it the summer kitchen. African communities were doing it thousands of years earlier for the same reason. Cooking raises indoor temperature by up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't add 10 degrees to a space you're trying to keep cool. The kitchen was always outside. That wasn't cultural habit. That was thermodynamics. Every single method you just learned has a version you can apply this week. The very first thing, and it costs nothing, open 2 windows on opposite sides of the same room at the same time. Not one window for airflow. 2 on different walls. Single-sided ventilation moves air through about 2 ceiling heights of depth. Cross-ventilation moves it through 5. The room transforms in about 10 seconds. You've been sitting in that room all summer with one window cracked, wondering why nothing feels like it's moving. For exterior shading, bamboo roll shades on your south and west-facing windows. The ones catching the worst afternoon sun. Under $40 per window at any hardware store. The U.S. Department of Energy's 77% heat gain reduction applies to any exterior shading device. 1 afternoon to install. The wall behind it never heats up. The rooms behind that wall stay cooler for the rest of the day. The Zeer pot. 2 unglazed terracotta pots. 1 smaller, 1 larger, coarse sand and water. Fill the gap between them with sand. Soak it thoroughly. Cover with a wet cloth. Under $15 at any garden center. Put a thermometer inside and check it in 4 hours. Verify it yourself. Night flushing. And this one is worth being honest about. It works best in dry inland climates where nighttime temperatures drop 15 to 20 degrees below the daytime high. If you're in Phoenix, Sacramento, Denver, this single habit can change your entire summer. Open everything fully at sundown when outdoor temperature drops below indoor temperature. Close everything at sunrise before it climbs back. A $5 indoor-outdoor thermometer tells you exactly when to switch. If you're in Houston or Miami, humid nights that stay warm, you'll get less benefit from this one specifically. The other methods still apply everywhere. Move cooking outside during the hottest months. A portable gas burner for outdoor dinner preparation removes up to 10 degrees of cooking heat from your interior. That's 10 degrees your air conditioner doesn't have to fight. 5,000 years. That is how long this knowledge has been building. Refined across 54 countries, in conditions that made failure genuinely dangerous, across more generations than most modern nations have existed. Air conditioning is an extraordinary technology. It is also 122 years old, costs hundreds of dollars every summer, depends on a grid you cannot control, and stops working the moment the power goes out. These methods are 5,000 years old. They were developed in 115-degree heat by people who did not have the option of failure. Modern architects are now studying the Great Mosque of Djenné. NASA researchers are documenting mudbrick thermal properties. The building knowledge that was called primitive is now being called innovative by the people who make their living designing buildings. It was never primitive, it was just African. And now you have it. The next video covers how African grandmothers kept eggs fresh for months without refrigeration, using a method so simple it costs almost nothing and works better than anything in your refrigerator. That video is already up. If this knowledge belongs in more people's hands, share it with someone who opened their electricity bill this month and felt it. Subscribe. We post 3 times a week, and every video is one thing African grandmothers knew that the modern world is only now catching up to.